Landing on My Heart, Chapter 43. All in Xinjiang Literature City. Cecile Ruan found that she was actually blushing at the sister call. Louis Fu, on the other hand, didn't realize anything was wrong. When I am old, I still play with my brother and sister, and there is no shame in losing it. Cecile Ruan didn't speak, but suddenly quickened his pace. The wind in early autumn is not too gentle, and it blows a little shivering on the face, occasionally stepping on a few fallen leaves, making a rustling sound, silenced by two people. I don't know how long it took. Cecile Ruan suddenly stopped. Why do you keep looking at me? Louis Fu laughed scoundrelly. You know I'm looking at you without looking at me. Cecile Ruan. It seems to be true. Cecile Ruan glared at him. Don't go, get in the car. But after getting in the car and sitting down, Cecile Ruan still felt that Louis Fu was watching her. What the hell are you looking at? When she said that, Louis Fu stopped looking at her and looked ahead, but said lightly, I'm looking at what you're blushing. As if pierced in camouflage, Cecile Ruan's thorns immediately stood up. Do you have 2 holes under your eyebrows that are long to breathe? Cecile Ruan was righteous and fierce enough to make Louis Fu think he was blind. The atmosphere inside the car dropped sharply again. Suddenly, Cecile Ruan's cell phone rang. She took it out and looked at it, hesitated for a moment, and hung up. Half a minute later, it started ringing again, and she hung up. When it rang for the 3rd time, she directly pressed mute and left it alone, but she still couldn't hold back the muttering of annoyed death in her mouth. Louis Fu noticed her movements and asked, who? Cecile Ruan didn't want to say it, and casually said, nothing. The more perfunctory, the more Louis Fu felt that something was wrong. His eyes looked back and forth at her, and he seemed to sense something else. Ex-boyfriend's phone. Cecile Ruan thinks that this man's brain circuitry is a little abnormal. Where did he sniff out that this is his ex-boyfriend's phone? Why, is your ex-girlfriend okay giving you a life-killing serial call? Louis Fu laughed, didn't answer her, and turned to look at the window. For the rest of the way, neither of them spoke. The call was from Dong Xian. Since she learned Cecile Ruan's address on her birthday, she has waited once, but Cecile Ruan happened to take Si Xiaozhen's car back that day, and the two have not met. And today she has been calling. It is estimated that it is coming again. Sure enough, when the car drove to the door of the famous courtier, Cecile Ruan saw the Porsche. The setting sun casts on the shiny body, swaying dazzlingly. Fortunately, she came back in Louis Fu's car today, otherwise the taxi stopped at the door and was bound to meet. She turned to look at Louis Fu, who was completely oblivious to the situation outside the car and stared at the window without knowing what he was thinking. After the car drove downstairs, Cecile Ruan pulled the car door and said, I'm going back. Louis Fu let out an expressionless Cecile Ruan closed the door, and before he reached the steps, the car started and drove forward to make a U-turn. Cecile Ruan, who had eaten a mouthful of exhaust, looked at Louis Fu's car inexplicably. Opening the door, Cecile Ruan saw Si Xiaozhen sitting on the sofa, almost leaving this beautiful world without being scared. Why are you here? Si Xiaozhen was originally anxious to make a phone call, and saw Cecile Ruan standing in front of her completely before letting go. What's going on with you? I just kept calling you and didn't answer. I thought something was wrong with you. Oh, Cecile Ruan said while changing his shoes, I didn't notice when the phone was turned off. It scares me to death. Si Xiaozhen pointed to the refrigerator. I saw the supermarket blueberry discount today, so I bought more, and I have already washed it and put it in the refrigerator for you. After speaking, she frowned dissatisfiedly. It's good that I have your home password, otherwise you don't know if your refrigerator is moldy. I haven't cooked at home lately. Cecile Ruan went into the room to change clothes, and Si Xiaozhen also followed in, and wanted to make small talk, but saw the model aircraft at the head of the bed. Si Xiaozhen immediately knelt on the bed to get it. You be careful. Cecile Ruan's clothes were halfway off, and she rushed over and patted Si Xiaozhen's hand. It's heavy, don't fall it. Si Xiaozhen didn't care about her, holding the model aircraft with bright eyes, and looked carefully. This is the German Havilland Comet, it's so exquisite. Where did you buy it? Expensive, right? No money. Cecile Ruan turned to change her clothes, turned her back to Si Xiaozhen, and said in a small voice, send it. Si Xiaozhen marveled at the delicacy of this model aircraft, and looked at it several times before blinking her eyes and asking, who sent it? Cecile Ruan felt as if she knew something in her eyes, but felt that it was impossible, so she perfunctorily passed, sent by a friend. This friend's surname is Fu. Seeing Cecile Ruan's somewhat shocked and somewhat weak eyes, Si Xiaozhen knew that she was right. His name is engraved on the wing. Who are you trying to fool? This Cecile Ruan really didn't notice. She took the model aircraft and turned it over, only to see the 3 letters FMY under the wing. This dogman sent a model aircraft engraved with his name. Too shameful. Cecile Ruan put down the model aircraft and walked out. Cecile Ruan followed her and asked, "What's the situation? What's the situation? Don't pretend to be with me. It's not a teenage girl anymore. What shyness." Cecile Ruan walked faster and faster, opened the refrigerator and took a bottle of water to drink, and said expressionlessly, "Thank you for the invitation. People are in space, just got off the spaceship, no signal." Cecile Ruan, it's very boring for you like this. Did you put him to sleep? Cecile Ruan almost choked to death without a sip of water. What's going on with you? Why else would you be hiding? Cecile Ruan leaned on the refrigerator and looked at Cecile Ruan. Anyway, he already had the answer in his heart, and he didn't ask. "I think it's quite amazing. Last time Bien Chien told me that you slapped him at the bar. He didn't kill you. Now this is chasing you." Cecile Ruan didn't speak, defaulted. Cecile Ruan was even more curious. "No, I said, what is the situation with him? Don't you hate him?" Cecile Ruan muttered, "I hate him. Yes, I don't understand even more. If the people you hate also hate you, this is normal. It means that you are all the way, but the people you hate like you, which means, it shows that he is quite discerning." Cecile Ruan couldn't refute this logic. Since Cecile Ruan was like a stuffy gourd that couldn't open her mouth, the topic did not continue, and the two talked about the recent holiday. Cecile Ruan said that she wanted to go to the surrounding area, but Cecile Ruan wanted to go to Lincheng. "My college celebration, everyone will have a class reunion, by the way, I have to go." Speaking of college, Cecile Ruan remembered that yesterday a colleague in the propaganda department asked her if she could participate in the admissions presentation. For the same reason as Louis Fu said, female pilots will attract more girls. Cecile Ruan had time, but felt that he didn't want to do anything else on vacation, so he wanted to stay at home, so he refused. However, the turning point came from the next day's mission. The flight department also gave Cecile Ruan an instructor to take the flight. Cecile Ruan and the instructor got on the plane with a smile, and when the guests came up, the cabin crew closed the hatch accordingly. At this time, the sound of the mechanic suddenly sounded in Cecile Ruan's headset, and her face changed. After making eye contact with the instructor, the two immediately asked the flight crew to open the hatch and get off the plane. Next to the wing, several airmen were scattered, bending around looking for something. One of the mechanics spread out his palm, and inside was 2 coins. Cecile Ruan almost fainted on the spot. Modern scientific society, which scattering money is scattering money here. Just now, when the aircraft was inspecting the situation, 2 coins were found under the plane, and everyone immediately began to search carefully. This situation, and not the first time it has been encountered, everyone has a headache. After the flight crew was notified to broadcast the inquiry, no one admitted it. So the crew called up the monitoring while looking for any other coins. The video shows a middle-aged male passenger throwing a few coins toward the fuselage before entering the cabin, taking advantage of the lack of attention from the security officer and flight attendant. Because the surveillance video could not see how many coins were dropped, the flight crew called the passenger out. The middle-aged man was dressed like a human being, and he was wearing large sunglasses, and he was reluctant to take them off when he came out. He admitted that he had tossed the coins, for a total of 4. The instructor laughed directly on the side, not wanting to say anything. Cecile Ruan felt smoke coming out of her head, and probably white smoke was coming out of her nose. She took a deep breath and tried to calm her tone. "Why are you tossing a coin?" The man in sunglasses did not feel guilty at all, and said straightforwardly, "Pray." Cecile Ruan knew it was a fucking mentally retarded reason. What blessings do you pray for? Did the security check make you unhappy, or did you think the tarmac looked like a koi pond? Everyone could hear that Cecile Ruan's tone had tried his best to contain his anger, and the man in sunglasses was unaware, grinded in place for a few seconds, turned his head and said to the security officer behind him, mainly, "I just saw a female driver on the covered bridge, and I don't worry, the female driver has a lot of pits. God, female driver." Probably angry to the extreme, Cecile Ruan was unusually calm, did not say a word, and waved to the security officer. The security officer immediately called the police, and the man in sunglasses instantly shouted, "Why do you still call the police? What's wrong with me? What are you doing?" A mechanic sneered at him, "Not only do you have to enter the bureau, if the engine has to be removed and checked, You will wait for the reparation, not much, just tens of thousands of yuan. After that, the security officer directly set him out, and the shouting of the man in sunglasses gradually disappeared into the covered bridge. The remaining 2 coins were not found on the ground, and the mechanics used a camera probe to reach into the aircraft engine. However, because the position is too far inside, it is really only possible to remove some parts of the engine for operation. Even the aircraft attendant couldn't hold back the swearing, "I have to work overtime again today." Naturally, this flight will be cancelled. As the passengers complained about getting off the plane, Louis Fu also arrived. He looked around the machine and finally stood in front of the engine, frowning. After the mechanic told him the specifics, he took the camera probe and looked at it, and Cecile Ruan leaned over to look. The two were so close that Cecile Ruan didn't notice that her cheek would rub against Louis Fu's chin if she moved. "Do you say that 9-year compulsory education is not universal?" Cecile Ruan saw the image of the 2 coins, imagined the engine being damaged after starting, and felt pain in his heart. How tragic this would have been to have taken off. Louis Fu slowly moved the position of the probe and whispered, "You are still quite distressed." Cecile Ruan, "Nonsense, can I not feel distressed?" Louis Fu chuckled, "You feel distressed about your family's plane." Cecile Ruan, "Are you etc. so automatically raised the bar?" Louis Fu didn't speak, and tapped Cecile Ruan's head with his index finger while closing the probe. "The flight is cancelled, go back and rest." Cecile Ruan also straightened up, turned his head, and saw a row of people behind him all looking at them. No wonder it was so quiet just now. Cecile Ruan certainly didn't really go back to rest. The police arrived, questioning about the situation, and Cecile Ruan had to be there. But throughout the questioning process, the man in sunglasses has been emphasizing that he is not worried about the female driver before tossing a coin to prey. Female drivers, female drivers. Cecile Ruan couldn't listen anymore and got up and left. Back at the World Aviation Building, Cecile Ruan dragged the flight case and walked quickly, and his angry appearance directly scared off a few colleagues who wanted to come to inquire about the situation. Instead, a few unwitting female colleagues from the propaganda department went downstairs for lunch and met Cecile Ruan in the elevator and said hello to her. "Xiao Ruan, got off the plane?" "Nope," Cecile Ruan said, "the flight was cancelled." Flight cancellations are a matter of occurrence, and a few commonplace female colleagues did not ask much and talked about something else. "Isn't it the peak period for school recruitment recently? The academic lecture hall of Harvest University can't be scheduled, changed to the auditorium. I looked at their LED screen, the size is not right, I have to do PPT again. Fortunately, we are miserable in making posters, the lecture hall of Yunhe University is not enough, it is directly advanced by 2 days, my poster has not been completed, and I have to stay up late and work overtime tonight." Speaking of Yunhe University, the man turned back to Cecile Ruan, "Xiao Ruan, aren't you going to the information meeting? Your alma mater, go back and do a lot of scenery. They are talking about the tour enrollment of the World Aviation Flight Academy this year, and they will go to major colleges and universities to preach, recruit college students, and train as a major reform driving college." Cecile Ruan said before that she didn't want to go, but when her colleague asked again, she was full of the female driver in the mouth of the man with sunglasses, and she couldn't get angry for a while, and agreed on the spot. "It is best to recruit all girls, full of female drivers, scare you not to fly for the rest of your life." On the day of the briefing, Cecile Ruan was still a little nervous. She studied basic physics in college, rarely had the opportunity to go on stage, and when she faced the black-pressed crowd, she kept beating drums in her heart. When she took the microphone to the stage, the boys in the lecture hall instantly boiled, and some people took out their mobile phones to take pictures. Cecile Ruan cleared her throat and was about to speak when she saw Louis Fu come in through the back door. Louis Fu told her at noon today, and she was free in the afternoon, and she would be picked up when the information session was over. Cecile Ruan doesn't understand what is there to pick up. The company obviously has a unified dispatch car. "You come to pick me up. Do you want to openly make a special or think that the label on me is not heavy enough? Just come to pick it up," but I didn't expect him to actually come in. From a distance, Cecile Ruan threw him a vague roll of his eyes. Louis Fu caught this roll of his eyes, but his expression did not fluctuate, and he stood quietly in the corner and watched her quietly. After the short explanation, it was the students' turn to ask questions. The boys were particularly enthusiastic, and the questions were quite serious at the beginning, and they began to run off track in the back. "Sister, are you single?" This caused a commotion underneath, and Cecile Ruan coughed and said succinctly, yes. As the words fell, Cecile Ruan subconsciously looked towards Louis Fu. With one hand in his pocket, he looked away, but was cut off by the overhead light, and he couldn't see his eyes clearly. The boy then asked, do you consider sibling love, sister? Cecile Ruan. Faced with another wave of laughter, Cecile Ruan said solemnly, I don't like my brother. The boy was only a little enthusiastic, but he was still relatively simple, and said in the laughter around him, oh, I like my brother. Time is limited, and this concludes the seminar. The last session was the on-site submission of resumes and questions, and Cecile Ruan was surrounded by a group and couldn't get away. But she glanced up at Louis Fu and saw him walking along the far edge towards the front row, and pointed to her front door, signaling him to wait there. It took about 20 minutes for the students to leave. Colleagues from the propaganda department were packing up their things, and Cecile Ruan was about to leave, but was stopped by a man. Cecile Ruan. The voice was a little uncertain, and it wasn't until Cecile Ruan turned around and the man came over happily. It's really you. I just looked at the back for a long time and I thought I was wrong. This person, Xiaoyu, is a direct senior at Cecile Ruan University, who was sent to graduate school after graduation, and now has a doctoral degree. The two had not seen each other since graduation, so at first, Xiaoyu just felt familiar and not sure when he was in the back row. You're captain now. Awesome. Cecile Ruan waved his hand again and blushed at the same time. No, I'm just a co-pilot. Didn't you say you went as a flight attendant before? Why are they all pilots now? The two chatted from this topic. Xiaoyu was very curious. The topic was a little unstoppable, and before he knew it, more than 20 minutes had passed. It wasn't until the people from the propaganda department packed up their things and alerted Cecile Ruan that she came back to her senses. Then I go first. Okay, you're busy. Before leaving, Xiaoyu took the initiative to leave contact information, so the two added a WeChat and left a phone number. Cecile Ruan held her phone and walked towards the front door, even her steps a little excited. As she walked, she touched her face again. Pretty calm when you just talked to him, right? Didn't act excited, did you? This is Xiaoyu, the popular figure of the school back then. When the post bar was going to be cold or not, he single-handedly drove the traffic of Yunhe University Bar, including his special building, which was full of his various photos. Walking to the front door, Cecile Ruan was busy changing notes for Xiaoyu's phone number and touched Louis Fu with her forearm. Let's go. Louis Fu glanced down at her phone and walked straight out. Yunhe University has a gated curfew, only official cars can drive in, and Louis Fu coming to pick up Cecile Ruan is a private matter, so his car is parked outside. The two walked side by side towards the school gate, and Cecile Ruan walked all the way to see, lamenting that he had not returned for several years, and the school had changed so much. Louis Fu next to him spoke coldly, who was that just now? Huh, Cecile Ruan was stunned for a moment. Who? Talked to you about that? Oh, brother Yu, former senior. Louis Fu said lightly, it's quite handsome. All in Xinjiang Literature City it does. Cecile Ruan said, the recognized school grass back then. I don't know if there is someone more handsome than him. Anyway, when I was studying, he was the most famous, won the national award every year, and was on the school basketball team. He sings so well, every school performance he is the finale. As soon as he came on stage, the screams below could deafen people's ears. Louis Fu lifted his eyelids and didn't speak. Cecile Ruan was still looking at himself. Later, I heard that a star agency was going to sign him. I thought he was going to be a star, but I didn't expect that he had been studying and really devoted himself to studying the high-speed collider. She looked around. After so many years in school, I don't know how many stubble girls' hearts have been harvested. Louis Fu took out his phone and glanced at the message, and at the same time asked, you have been harvested too? Cecile Ruan suddenly felt a little nervous, and hurriedly said, don't talk nonsense. Her eyes dodged, and there was some hint of wanting to cover up in her tone. She did have a little bit of. I liked Xiaoyu. At that time, who didn't like any aesthetically normal girl? But people have a girlfriend who has been talking about since high school, and from time to time comes to the school to check the post. What can Cecile Ruan do? Even QQ dare not at it. After so many years, the school grass is still the school grass, and it has not been academically recognized as a brother, and Cecile Ruan inexplicably has a feeling of relief. After all, compared to the beauty twilight, heroic Xia Ding is also a suffocating thing. The osmanthus of Yunhua University is in bloom, shining golden in clusters under the setting sun, which is particularly cute. And Louis Fu did not speak along the way. Cecile Ruan naturally did not talk to himself, and walked to the school gate in silence. At this time it was class time, there were not many people, but the snack bars outside the school gate were all open. Smelling the familiar scent of flour armor vermicelli, Cecile Ruan was a little gluttonous. To say that the best food is still the flour armor fan at the gate of Yunhua University, she has been thinking about it for several years, but it will not let her make a special trip to eat this. But today they are all here, and she can't help it. Wait, Cecile Ruan stopped Louis Fu. I want to eat flour armor vermicelli. Louis Fu glanced up at her from her phone, said nothing, and turned to walk towards the store. The store is still as small and crowded as before, and it can't seat a few people at a time. Cecile Ruan saw that Louis Fu had been looking at his phone as if he was busy, so he said, "How about you go back first? I'll take the company car back in a moment." Louis Fu pulled out a stool, wiped it with a tissue, and said, "No." "Okay." Cecile Ruan called a bowl of hot and sour nail fans and asked Louis Fu, who said he wasn't hungry. So Cecile Ruan had to eat by himself. During this period, Louis Fu kept looking at his phone, no expression, and did not say anything. Cecile Ruan was halfway through eating and asked, "Would you like to taste some? I'll pick the nails for you." Louis Fu looked at the phone without looking up. No, if you don't want to come, you won't come. Why are you so reluctant, as if I am forcing you?" Cecile Ruan was overwhelmed by Louis Fu's attitude, and his appetite disappeared for a long time. She wiped her mouth with a tissue and said, "I'm full, let's go." Louis Fu heard this and put 100 piece on the table, got up and left. Cecile Ruan looked at his back and blinked. All in Xinjiang Literature City, is it really sick? For a long time after getting into the car, neither of them spoke. The car drove out of the speed bump outside the campus and onto the highway. Cecile Ruan looked at the speedometer and asked expressionlessly, "Are you busy today?" Louis Fu propped up the steering wheel and said lightly, "Not busy." "Not busy, you drive so fast." "Soon, okay, not as fast as a high-speed collider." "Do you drive four wheels with the atomic collider at a specific speed? Why don't you compare altitude with your plane?" Cecile Ruan didn't bother to pay attention to him and tugged at the seat belt that had strangled her uncomfortably at the same time as her cell phone rang. She took out her phone and looked at it. Dong Xian called again. Cecile Ruan didn't really want to pick it up, and was about to hang up, when he suddenly felt the car suddenly deflect. She looked sideways at Louis Fu and saw him pull over to the side of the road, unfasten his seatbelt, open the door and walk down. "You can pick it up if you want, I'll get off." The car door slammed shut, and the phone in his hand automatically hung up because no one answered. The small interior space suddenly became quiet and eerie. Cecile Ruan looked at the figure of Louis Fu on the side of the road and blinked his eyes in confusion. Landing on my heart. Chapter 44. At this moment, the car is parked on the side of the road in a residential area. There are not many pedestrians, and there is only the sound of car horns everywhere. Cecile Ruan looked at the silhouette of Louis Fu through the car window, standing there alone, with a cigarette in his mouth, and the lighter clicked on the fire, and he turned his head to light it, and white smoke rose in front of his face. When she was wondering, Louis Fu glanced back at her, met his gaze, and quickly looked away casually. Cecile Ruan was lying on her stomach at the window, full of question marks. What's going on with this man? What's wrong with me taking a call? Where did the inexplicable temper come from? At the same time, the phone rings again. Cecile Ruan subconsciously wanted to hang up again, but fortunately she looked at it more. It was a call from the bank. It was to promote financial products. Cecile Ruan chatted a couple of words with little interest, so he found an excuse to hang up. At the same time, Louis Fu turned around, and the smoke between his index and middle fingers was only half burned. Cecile Ruan sensed he had something to say, so he rolled down the window, but the two looked at each other for a long time, but no one spoke. When the cigarette slowly burned to the end, Louis Fu puffed it out and turned to get into the car. While wearing his seat belt, he asked, "So finished talking?" Cecile Ruan found it baffling. "What do I have to talk to a money salesman?" Cecile Ruan was enough of his sudden love today, and he didn't want to endure it anymore. "If you don't want to deal with me anyway, then I won't bother you." With this in mind, Cecile Ruan was about to open the door and get out of the car, but when his hand touched his seat belt, a thought suddenly crossed his mind. She looked up at him carefully, the thoughts in her mind gradually took shape, and a shallow smile slowly appeared in her eyes. No wonder his whole person is wrong today. He should not be jealous, right? It's so sour in this car. One person in the car has a calm face, while the other person is smiling casually. The contrast is too obvious, and the one with low air pressure is more irritable. Louis Fu slowly started the car, drove to the empty avenue, raised his eyebrows slightly, focused his eyes on the traffic light in front of him, and said nonchalantly, "Just have a phone call and be so happy." Happy? Are you so funny? How old people are jealous like elementary school students. Are you jealous? Eating telemarketing vinegar. He didn't speak, and the corners of Cecile Ruan's mouth were almost reaching her ears, afraid that the people next to her would see her wanton smile and kill people in anger, so she bent down and covered her face with her hands. But even so, her smile leaked out of her fingers. What Cecile Ruan didn't know was that, from Louis Fu's perspective, her sweeping behavior didn't help. Instead, it is adding firewood. Louis Fu pushed the soles of his feet, the car suddenly accelerated, due to inertia. Cecile Ruan bang rebounded, fell on the seat, pinned behind the ears, bangs suddenly spread out in front of his eyes, the whole shawl exuded embarrassment. Cecile Ruan stared blankly at the few hairs in front of him, and was shocked for a long time. What the hell are you with this temper? Are you chasing me, or am I chasing you? If you haven't ascended to the throne, this temper, isn't it going to heaven if you are on the throne? Are you chasing people like that? Until he returned to the famous apartment, Cecile Ruan never said a word to Louis Fu. All in Xinjiang Literature City, when she slammed the door and got out of the car, Louis Fu drove the car straight out. Bai Yang is still waiting for him at the World Aviation Building, and the final executive meeting on the reform of flight quality control will be held tomorrow, with the participation of the entire company's top management. Today, the matter is a foregone conclusion, but those who discern it remain. Bai Yang saw Louis Fu's dark face, and his heart was apprehensive, trembling to show Louis Fu the flow of tomorrow's meeting. Louis Fu took it, and at the same time his phone rang, so he put the process sheet aside to check the information. Zhu Dong sent a few news about the new route of Linqing Airport in the autumn and winter season, and wanted to find time to chat with him. All in Xinjiang Literature City. Louis Fu replied okay. And when he exited the dialog box, he saw a small red dot in the moments column. He ghostly entered, and sure enough, a small head of Cecile Ruan appeared in the upper right corner. Give you some sunshine and you will shine, give you a flood and you will flood, give you a cotton jacket and you will sweat, give you a broken pocket and you will climb inside and lay eggs. Me off. Louis Fu stared at this paragraph for a long time, not knowing whether he felt angry or funny. Who this circle of friends is scolding, you don't need to ask. Cecile Ruan agrees that Louis Fu should be well aware. But 2 minutes later, she noticed a familiar avatar appear in the likes list. Like, still liked. How did Cecile Ruan read a feeling of read but not care from this like? Is there a little bit of self-knowledge? I'm scolding you, love Shin Kyoro Mingyu. In addition, Bian Xian also commented, who are you scolding? Question, question, question. Before Cecile Ruan could type, Si Xiaozhen was the first to reply to Bian Xian. Who else could it be? Bian Xian, quarrel again. Si Xiaozhen, what's the noise? Noisy, flirting. Bian Xian, using the circle of friends as a love base, I blocked it. Si Xiaozhen, I can't stand it either. Cecile Ruan, what the hell are you talking about? Cecile Ruan, is this flirting? Cecile Ruan, is that genuinely abusive? He's a neuropathy today. Bian Xian, did we say who it was? Si Xiaozhen, did we say who it was? For the next 2 days, Cecile Ruan didn't see anyone from Louis Fu, and he didn't call or message again. The vinegar is quite strong. Cecile Ruan saw Louis Fu again, at the door of the flight department's conference room 2 days later. That afternoon, after returning home, she dragged the flight case and passed there, and saw the black-pressed crowd coming out, some with happy faces, others with frowns. Louis Fu, who was the leader, looked indifferent, unable to see emotions, only a faint tiredness under his eyes. The group left the conference room and went back to their respective offices, while Louis Fu followed by Yen and a few assistants and walked to the other side. The two were so far apart that Louis Fu didn't notice Cecile Ruan. A few colleagues around were whispering, and Cecile Ruan withdrew his gaze from Louis Fu and leaned over and asked, "What are you talking about? Captain Fan, you didn't watch the group chat." Cecile Ruan shook his head. Captain Fan said, "Hasn't the reform of flight quality monitoring been said for a few months? In the end, the result has never been decided." Since the co-pilot you died of acute cholecystitis a few months ago, all the pilots of World Airlines have been silently following the progress of this matter. But it was just a concern, not much expectation. There have also been proposals for reform, but due to the obstacles of human and material resources and the actual situation, they have not been implemented. And the person who handled this time is Louis Fu. It's not that they don't trust him, his ability to work is in everyone's eyes, but he just thinks that what Hu Ta-suk has not done before, Louis Fu obviously will not have much breakthrough. Moreover, this reform even Fu Dong has a neutral attitude. Someone pointed to the door of the conference room and continued, it seemed that yesterday's meeting was going to be decided, but it turned out to be 7 or 8 hours, and there were always objections, and then today the meeting was held again, and I don't know if it will be finalized. After a discussion of 7788, Captain Fan finally concluded his speech. Come on, don't guess, this is not something we can decide, we will know the result when we look back. After that, he turned and left, holding his hands and muttering, if only President Fu really overthrew the old system, alas. Cecile Ruan glanced back at the glass corridor, where Louis Fu's figure loomed. She looked at it for a while, and faintly felt that Louis Fu had indeed lost weight during this time. No wonder it feels like he looks tired today, 2 long meetings in a row, are you still human? Cecile Ruan bit her finger and looked again at the glass corridor. Louis Fu's figure had disappeared. 2 hours later, the 2 documents came out and blew up the entire staff of the World Aviation Flight Department. One is the Regulations on the Administration of Flight Quality Monitoring, 2019 trial, and the other is the negative list for the application of flight data. Cecile Ruanzi carefully read these 2 documents, and when he returned to the WeChat dialog box, the chat records of several groups were all 99+, and everyone's excitement was visible. After all, there have been too many cases of pilots being punished in disguised form because of QAR, and even some accidents are attributed to QAR incidents and the consequences of punishment on the pilot's psychology. Now that the reform plan has come out, it has completely abandoned the practice of escrow with fines for nearly 2 decades, and has exchanged for a benign and safe environment. Who cannot be excited? The painting style in the colleague group slowly turned into a praise for Louis Fu's merits, and even the forward circle of friends did not forget to thank Mr. Fu, and did not care that he could not see these at all, that is, he was grateful from the bottom of his heart. Cecile Ruan felt that his passionate insult seemed a little weird in the pile of praise, so he secretly deleted it. After thinking about it, I still have a little bit of weakness. Louis Fu worked day and night to reform the working environment of these pilots, fighting wits with a group of old foxes. Everyone was tired and thin, and she was still gambling with him because he kicked the accelerator. In this way, it is not enough to delete that circle of friends. So Cecile Ruan retweeted a link from a colleague about the flight quality monitoring reform. Just as he was about to press the send button, Cecile Ruan paused. Just by retweeting, Louis Fu may not be able to see her sincerity. All in Xinjiang Literature City, so what to do? You can't blow rainbow farts like those in the group, right? She sat and thought for a long time, and when she refreshed the circle of friends, she saw that Captain Fan also forwarded the link. She glanced at the text and felt that it was quite pertinent, and really praised Louis Fu's actions, pertinent and sincere. Louis Fu should be able to feel it, right? So Cecile Ruan casually copied Captain Fan's original words. A few minutes after sending it out, Louis Fu liked it. Cecile Ruan watched his avatar appear on the like list, hooked his lips and smiled, and the guilt in his heart suddenly disappeared. The next second, Louis Fu sent a message. This is the first time Louis Fu has taken the initiative to send her a message in these 2 days. Louis Fu, love me forever. Louis Fu, always with me. Cecile Ruan, what is this man whining? Cecile Ruan, what bird language are you talking about? Louis Fu didn't reply to her. Cecile Ruan continued to message him, asking why he was complaining. Cecile Ruan, did you send it wrong? After waiting for a while, there was still no response. Cecile Ruan became increasingly convinced that he had made a mistake. Such ambiguous words came from nowhere, and I don't know which woman I was flirting with. Dogmen actually raise fish ponds. Cecile Ruan gritted his teeth in anger, almost poking his fingers at the screen as he typed. Cecile Ruan, you sent it in bulk. Cecile Ruan, for other sisters. Cecile Ruan, Louis Fu, your fish pond is really big, smiley face. After the 3 are sent. Cecile Ruan waited a minute, but Louis Fu did not reply. Well, the dog man was caught in the fish pond. Go lie on my blacklist, you. Cecile Ruan sneered angrily, and was about to block him when he finally replied with a message. He sent a screenshot, a link that Cecile Ruan had just forwarded, on which she sprinkled more than 100 words, and the preview interface could not be loaded. And he clicked expand, and after taking a screenshot, he specifically marked the last 2 sentences in red. When Cecile Ruan saw the screenshot, Tian Lingai suddenly felt numb with embarrassment. We at World Airlines did not wait for bigger accidents to push for QAR reform. After all, those accidents may not be affordable for any pilot or company. The practice of World Airlines is the correct way to truly use QAR for flight quality monitoring, so as to truly improve flight technology and aviation safety, instead of using QAR incidents to punish pilots as a low-level means, and the good tools have been abused. It is like giving a soldier a sharp blade, but the soldier uses it to kill innocents. Mr. Fu worked hard. Love you forever. Always with you. Cecile Ruan. When she copied it casually just now, she only felt that Captain Fan praised the true feeling and simplicity, and even copied it directly without reading it, but she didn't expect that Captain Fan came to a more sincere and simple expression at the end. Why is a man in his 50s still so tumultuous? While Cecile Ruan was embarrassed, Louis Fu sent another message. Louis Fu, next time, copy the dim sum. Cecile Ruan. Louis Fu, also, I don't have any other sisters. Louis Fu, you're the only one.
Welcome to Storyverse. If you have any novels you'd like to see or stories you'd like to share, feel free to leave us a comment or send us a private message. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our community of avid readers and romance enthusiasts.
Landing on my heart, Chapter 45. You're the only one. Cecile Ruan stared at this sentence for a long time, feeling a burning swelling sensation in his heart, and his chest was stuffy. This man was blunt, and he really didn't blink his eyes. Of course, Cecile Ruan doesn't know if he really doesn't fluctuate at all when typing. She stood there for a while, and the crew was far away, and she was the only one in the hall. With his fingers tapping on the screen for a moment, Cecile Ruan typed a few words. Cecile Ruan, did you have dinner? The moment it was sent, Cecile Ruan was a little nervous. She and Louis Fu have not met or spoken in the past 2 days, and she feels that there is a faint feeling of Cold War between the two. But she is now taking the initiative to make peace, right? Cecile Ruan waited half a minute before sending another message. Cecile Ruan, Mr. Fu. Without waiting for Louis Fu's response, he waited for a text message from Dong Xian. Ruan, answer the phone, there is an emergency. Less than a minute after receiving the text message, Dong Xian called. Seeing that the caller ID was not Louis Fu, Cecile Ruan felt a slight loss, and when he picked up the phone, his tone was also a little helpless. What's wrong? Dong Xian, your aunt is sick, just after surgery, you come to take a look. Cecile Ruan looked up at the time, where? 3 city hospitals. Cecile Ruan's aunt is Dong Xian's sister, named Dong Jing. Originally the director of an elementary school admissions office, after Dong Xian remarried, she also resigned from her position in primary school and went to the Jing family hotel group to start a market. Dong Jing used to mix well in the admissions office, but in the end, the temple was small, and when she went to a larger platform, she really showed her strength, and she mixed well. When Cecile Ruan arrived at the 3rd City Hospital, it was already 7 o'clock in the evening, and the autumn night came early, and the bustle of the hospital seemed out of place in this quiet night. Cecile Ruan went to the cardiac surgery inpatient department according to the instructions, and Dong Xian waited for her at the door of the ward. Counting that the two had not seen each other for several years, the moment she saw Cecile Ruan walking over in uniform, Dong Xian's eyes were a little sour. When walking towards her, his steps were also a little vain. Ruan, she wanted to say something, but was interrupted by Cecile Ruan's blunt remarks. How's your aunt? What Dong Xian originally wanted to say froze and pointed to the ward. Not awake yet. Cecile Ruan bypassed her and walked into the hospital room, where she saw Dong Jing lying on the hospital bed, with water hanging from the back of her hand, and the nurse busy with miscellaneous things. I don't know if it's telepathy. As soon as Cecile Ruan walked to the bed, Dong Jing woke up. She opened her eyes in a daze, and the moment she saw Cecile Ruan, she was still a little confused. Aunt, Cecile Ruan leaned closer. Is it better? Dong Jing was put into the hospital because of heart pressure in the early morning, and immediately arranged surgery, and he had woken up once in the morning, and his spirit recovered a little bit. Ruan is here. She smiled, looked at the uniform on Cecile Ruan, and said with a smile, I heard your mother say that you are a pilot now, and it really is. Cecile Ruan did not go to Dong Jing's house to play when she was a child, when she was not married and had no children, and regarded Cecile Ruan as her own daughter. Later, Dong Xian divorced, Cecile Ruan followed her father alone, and the contact with Dong Jing faded. After all, she didn't want to go, and Dong Jing didn't want to come to her house all the time. Later, Dong Jing went to the Jing group to do marketing and stayed abroad for many years, and the two almost never met. How did you get into the hospital? Cecile Ruan asked. Okay. Dong Jing waved his hand and asked Cecile Ruan to get closer. These years of running business upside down day and night, my body has long been dead, and you don't say to find time to see my aunt. When Cecile Ruan and Dong Jing were chatting, Dong Xian stood behind her, did not speak, and silently looked at the two. After about 10 minutes, Cecile Ruan felt that Dong Jing was a little unable to speak, so she planned to leave. Dong Jing saw what she meant, and quickly took her hand. Ruan, Aunt will tell you something else. Huh, Dong Jing glanced at her sister behind her and sighed. You see that your father and mother divorced at the beginning, you were unwilling to follow your mother, and then your father died, and your mother let you live together in the past and you were not willing. Aunt knows that the divorce of parents has a psychological impact on children, but after so many years, you have grown up, and you should be able to understand your mother's original choice. Marriage sometimes can't help themselves, the relationship is gone, and if it goes on, it is also torturing each other. But parents always love their children, you don't have to hold on to it. Mom is this one, where do you go to find another? When Dong Jing said this, Cecile Ruan looked back at Dong Xian, she wrinkled her brows, her eyes were red, and the moment she met her gaze, the tip of her nose soured, and her eyes immediately moistened. Cecile Ruan turned her head and continued to listen to Dong Jing. She is nothing more than to persuade Cecile Ruan not to gamble with Dong Xian. Even if she wants to gamble, it is enough for so many years. With so many divorced families in recent years, I have never seen someone like Cecile Ruan who has never interacted with her mother to death. Cecile Ruan replied, no matter what her aunt said, she said yes. It wasn't until Dong Jing was tired again and her eyes were almost unable to open that Cecile Ruan left. Aunt, you have a good rest, I will come to see you another day. When he said this, Dong Jing was already asleep and there was no echo. Cecile Ruan went out with her things, and Dong Xian followed. Ruan, walking to the door of the ward, Dong Xian stopped her. I'll send you home. No need, I'll take a taxi myself. Cecile Ruan turned to face her. Also, don't wait for me outside my house in the future, it's very annoying. Hearing the word annoying, Dong Xian understood that she had just promised to be good, and she was coaxing her aunt. Her loose expression collapsed little by little. Cecile Ruan took out a card from her bag and stuffed it into Dong Xian's hand. This is the money you have called me over the years, I haven't touched a penny, you keep it yourself. Dong Xian didn't answer, the card fell to the ground, and no one picked it up. She stared at the old card on the ground, and the incomprehension and helplessness that had been squeezed for more than 10 years all erupted at this moment. It was not that she didn't think about the harm to her children when she divorced, but it was not her fault that a marriage came to an end, and Cecile Ruan was young and insensible, and she could tolerate it. But now that Cecile Ruan is in her 20s, she really can't understand it. Ruan, why can't you accept the fact that I divorced your father? I admit that in order to take care of your mood, your father and I have never quarreled in front of you and blushed, and suddenly speaking of divorce, you may not be able to accept it, but you really can't see the changes in us during that time. Cecile Ruan pressed the tip of his tongue against his cheek and did not speak. Of course, she didn't think that divorce must be wrong, but how could Dong Xian be so straightforward and think that she didn't know anything? They divorced when Cecile Ruan was 14 years old, and she was in her third year of junior high school. The afternoon of the third year of junior high school has one more class than the second day of junior high school, and school ends at 6 p.m. every day. It's 20 minutes from school to home, but there's a trail that takes only 10 minutes, but there's a low wall in between. Cecile Ruan was skin, and the other little girl she was traveling with was reluctant to climb over the wall, so she walked the path by herself every day. Her house is in an old alley, facing north is a passage to the main road, facing south is a path. Usually there are no people, over the low wall and then through an abandoned construction site is this path. I can't remember exactly the day Cecile Ruan jumped off a low wall with her school bag on her back and saw her mother get out of a Mercedes-Benz just after passing the construction site. She hid behind the abandoned board house and watched from afar until Dong Xian turned into the path she came out. For a long time, Cecile Ruan saw the Mercedes several times. Sometimes they would stop there for a long time, and the two of them didn't know what to say in the car. Sometimes the man would get out of the car, open the trunk and get something for Dong Xian. Cecile Ruan had never seen the man's appearance clearly, only thought it was a little fat and a little old. Another time, she saw that the man gave Dong Xian a small box. Dong Xian took it, put it in the bag and turned home. Cecile Ruan then arrived home, took advantage of Dong Xian's cooking time to rummage through her bag, and found that it was a necklace. All in Xinjiang literature city. Cecile Ruan's family was poor and had never seen any jewelry, but her guess was that it should be worth a lot. So Dong Xian didn't know that divorce was not Cecile Ruan's heart knot, this was. A few months later, Dong Xian filed for divorce from Cecile Ruan's father. The divorce tug-of-war lasted for several months, during which Dong Xian moved out. Cecile Ruan doesn't know where she lives, perhaps at the man's house. Cecile Ruan's father finally agreed to the divorce and asked Cecile Ruan who she wanted to follow. Cecile Ruan didn't even think about it, so he just said that he had followed his father. Then the two sat facing each other for a long time without speaking. Finally, Dong Xian got up and said, "Good." Cecile Ruan couldn't say what she felt psychologically at the time. She thought that Dong Xian would talk to her a lot and persuade her to follow her, but she said yes. After several days, there was no more Dong Xian at home, and Cecile Ruan reacted later. All in Xinjiang literature city. I was really abandoned. Cecile Ruan was out of his mind for a long time, and was finally pulled back by Dong Xian's words. Ruan, it's not my fault that I divorced your father, you are unfair to me like this. My dad is poor and has no skills, but at least my dad is dedicated to you. Cecile Ruan dropped the sentence and turned away. Dong Xian couldn't react for a long time. She didn't understand what Cecile Ruan's words meant. Why did she get involved in single-mindedness? By the time she came to her senses, Cecile Ruan's figure had disappeared into the elevator. Walking out of the inpatient department, it was already completely dark. Cecile Ruan stood on the side of the road waiting for the car, staring at the traffic in a daze, not noticing a black car slowly stopping in front of her. Jing Yuan rolled down the window, raised her sunglasses, and after making sure it was Cecile Ruan, asked, "Why are you here?" Cecile Ruan looked back at her, and Jing Yuan asked again, "Are you sick?" "Nope," Cecile Ruan said, "I came to see relatives." "Oh, I'm also coming to see relatives." Jing Yuan asked, "How are you doing over there, are you okay?" Cecile Ruan looked at Jing Yuan, not knowing what to say. She thought that if she hadn't seen the car at that time, or if Dong Xian had been a little tougher at that time, maybe she would have followed Dong Xian and left. And now she and Jing Yuan may be good sisters. "It's okay, you can go inside," Cecile Ruan said. There was a car coming from behind. After Jing Yuan left, Cecile Ruan hailed a taxi. The driver asked her where to go. She thought about it, and reported the address of Bianxian's bar. After arriving at the place, I found that today was the weekend. There were many guests, and Bianxian was so busy that his feet did not touch the ground. Cecile Ruan sat for a while and went back. During this period, the phone kept ringing. She was annoyed, so she turned off the mute, and thought about when to change a calling card. It was not yet 10 o'clock when she arrived at the Mingchen apartment, and she walked very slowly, and on the way she met an old lady walking her dog. The chihuahua was fierce and yelled at Cecile Ruan, causing her to take several steps back. The old lady saw that Cecile Ruan's eyes were red, and immediately picked up the dog and apologized. "Oh little girl, I'm sorry, my dog is a little fierce, don't bite, don't be afraid." Cecile Ruan didn't say anything and trotted all the way into the elevator. After more than 10 seconds of elevator ascent, Cecile Ruan arrived before he could sort out his expression. She pulled the flight case and rubbed her eyes as she walked towards the house. The voice-activated lights came on, and when she looked up, she saw Louis Fu standing in front of her house. "Where have you been? Why are you here?" The two spoke in unison, and Louis Fu said this, and saw Cecile Ruan's expression was wrong. All in Xinjiang literature city, he approached slowly, leaned closer to Cecile Ruan's face and sniffed, "Are you drinking again?" This time Cecile Ruan didn't deny it, answered in a low voice, and then crossed Louis Fu to open the door. She walked into the living room and put down the flight case, followed by Louis Fu, standing right next to the TV. I saw your message after I was busy, and no one answered your phone. Oh, I didn't look at my phone, I'm sorry. Cecile Ruan turned and looked at Louis Fu, her throat suddenly itching. Just now, she only casually turned on the light at the entrance, and into the living room, the shadow shone on Louis Fu, as if this person was not real. But even so, this person standing there made Cecile Ruan feel like he wanted to hug. Cecile Ruan touched her lower abdomen. It may be that you have recently been ovulating, and oxytocin secretion is too strong to produce this feeling. It would be nice to drink more water to speed up your metabolism. She looked at Louis Fu and said, Mr. Fu, I want to drink water. Louis Fu looked into her eyes, trying to see something in her eyes. After a few seconds, he gave up, turned around and went to the kitchen to pour a cup of hot water. When he came out, Cecile Ruan had taken off his shoes and was sitting on the sofa, curled up with his legs hugging his knees. Louis Fu handed her the water glass. Cecile Ruan took it, drank it all in one gulp, and choked at the end. Louis Fu sat down next to her and patted her on the back, less than a punch between the two. When he reached out and patted Cecile Ruan's back, his arms formed a circle around her. When the palm fell gently, it seemed to hold her. But the next second it lifted up, and the sense of surround disappeared, and with it, the heart was empty. Every second, Cecile Ruan wanted to catch that fleeting embrace, to think that he wouldn't lift his hand and just put it on her back. What's wrong with you? Louis Fu didn't wait for an answer, looked down at her, but instead buried her face completely in her knees. The whole person was like a baby shrunk in the womb. Do you want to hold it? Cecile Ruan. Before she could say anything, Louis Fu suddenly reached out and grabbed her and pressed her head to her chest. If you don't speak, I'll acquiesce to you. Cecile Ruan, of course, had nothing to say. She is now very insecure and wants a bosom to indulge in. And the temperature of his arms was just right, and there was a clear and pleasant smell. Cecile Ruan sniffed twice a little greedily, her face pressed against his chest, undulating and itchy. The room was silent, and rain began to fall outside the window again. The autumn rain is more lingering than the spring rain, sparsely passing through the leaves, making a small and shimmering sound, entangled with the sound of Louis Fu's breathing, indistinguishable from each other. I don't know how long it took, a rain stopped, and the lights of 10,000 homes outside gradually went out. Cecile Ruan felt a few fine strands of hair brush by Louis Fu's breath to her cheek, a little itchy, so she moved her position. A voice suddenly sounded overhead. Don't rub it, you will charge interest if you rub it again. Cecile Ruan looked up for a second. What interest? She straightened up to look at Louis Fu, and his hand naturally slipped down to her waist. Louis Fu tilted his head and looked down at her, like a kiss. Gate 46. Landing on my heart, chapter 46. When he said this, there was a shallow smile on his lips, which looked very informal. Cecile Ruan was stunned for a moment, raised her hand and gently patted his cheek, and then jumped off the sofa. You want to be beautiful. Louis Fu stood up slowly, feeling a little helpless. Okay, Ode. You're pretty good at finding yourself under the steps. Cecile Ruan turned to ignore him, picked up the empty water glass and put it in the kitchen sink to clean. Louis Fu followed behind her, with a subtle sound of running water, and asked, Aren't you sad? Cecile Ruan rubbed his glass hard and let out a hmm. Then I'll go back. Cecile Ruan lowered her head and said thank you almost inaudibly. Louis Fu didn't hear it, but halfway there, he turned around and asked, Are you free tomorrow afternoon? What's wrong? Accompany me out. Where to? Friends get together. Cecile Ruan turned to look at him, and although he didn't speak, there was a clear why did you bring me with your friends? Inquiry in her eyes. I really don't understand or pretend not to understand. Louis Fu turned his neck and sighed long. Other people have a wife's wife, have a girlfriend's girlfriend, I don't want to go alone. It's quite pitiful. Oh, yes, Cecile Ruan turned around and continued to wipe the cup, his eyebrows raised slightly, you cannot go. Louis Fu looked down at her, not sure if he had just seen a light smile at the corner of her mouth. Quarterly bonus double, go or not? Cecile Ruan put down the cup heavily, bang, and made it you think I'm going to give in for the money. After a few seconds of silence. What time is tomorrow? That's right, I just don't have to live with money. All in Xinjiang Literature City, 2 points. Louis Fu slowly pulled out of the kitchen, lifted his chin at her, and smiled, I'll pick you up. The autumn rain was intermittent, but it fell again at night, and in the morning, the rain dropped along with the temperature. Cecile Ruan rarely slept so restlessly. Near dawn, she had a dream. The dream was broken and illogical, but implicated in each other, and one scene after another flashed in front of her like a horse lantern, not immersive, but like a moviegoer. First, I saw that the wall that I used to climb over when I was a child collapsed, but what was smashed was the dresser that belonged to Dong Xian at home. As soon as he turned around, he saw Dong Xian holding a palette, sitting in front of the window and painting oil paintings. Cecile Ruan looked closer, and the painting turned out to be what she looked like when she grew up. The last memory of the dream was blurred here, and when Cecile Ruan opened his eyes, the clock on the wall was already pointing to 8 o'clock. She sat up straight, did not have the heart to immerse herself in the emotions of the dream, and immediately got out of bed to wash. There was a safety training this morning, and if nothing else, it should be carried out until noon. However, Louis Fu said that the time was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and she wanted to get up early to get dressed, but now it seems that she has no time. But hurrying, she returned home at 12:30, leaving herself an hour and a half. An hour and a half is really not enough, just washing your hair and then blowing it takes half an hour. After putting on her makeup, she had only 20 minutes left, but she stood in front of the wardrobe hesitating. Today it cooled down again, and the weather software prompted to stay warm, but Cecile Ruan flipped through a few coats back and forth, either thinking that this one was too bright or that one was too thick, and dressed like a bear. She finally chose 2 pieces for Bian Xian and Si Xiaozhen to refer to. Bian Xian, why is Jing important so going? Solemnly, it seems to be a little. She just inexplicably has a feeling that she can't go out casually today. Si Xiaozhen, dating. Originally, Cecile Ruan had already marked the word does not count, but after thinking about it, he deleted it. Cecile Ruan, make money. After sending it, and regardless of the series of question marks sent by the 2 people, Cecile Ruan put down his phone and decided to make his own choice. From the inside to the coat, there are obviously delicate and bright new styles, but Cecile Ruan subconsciously chose a plain color suitable for autumn, feeling that people could not see her elaborate dress. But the caution that could not be hidden fell on perfume and jewelry. In the end, she had trouble choosing shoes. The shoe cabinet was at the entrance, and Cecile Ruan glanced over, a little tangled. She wanted to wear stiletto heels, but she didn't know what the occasion was today or whether she needed to walk. After a moment's hesitation, the doorbell rang. Cecile Ruan opened the door and pushed it out a little, and the door was pulled open by Louis Fu outside. The line of sight extended little by little, as if a scroll of painting was slowly spread, and when he saw the full picture of Cecile Ruan, Louis Fu's eyes were fixed, and his eyes gradually deepened. What for? Seeing that he didn't speak, Cecile Ruan hooked his hand at him. Help me choose a pair of shoes. Louis Fu's gaze moved away from her inch by inch, and finally looked neatly at the shoe cabinet, and casually pointed to a pair of black stiletto heels. Cecile Ruan looked at the shoes and muttered, "You're pretty expensive." At a glance, she fancied her most expensive shoes. Louis Fu whispered, "What do I fancy is not expensive?" Cecile Ruan asked him while putting on his shoes, "What did you say?" "Nothing." Louis Fu saw that she only had one last procedure, so he withdrew to make way for her. Cecile Ruan put on his shoes and took his bag, glaring at his back the moment he closed the door. "Dogman, don't think I didn't hear. Buckle and search, more than a quarterly bonus, to see what hurts you." A gust of wind blew through, and the dead yellow leaves on the side of the road fell one after another, but the dark clouds were blown away a lot, and the gloomy sky shone through a ray of light. Or the box on the top floor of Warner Manor, Zhu Dong played with the chips in his hand, and couldn't help but hit Hatcher. The girlfriend next to him patted him, "Stayed up late again last night." Zhu Dong pulled his eyelids and did not speak, which was regarded as acquiescence. Ji Yan, who was sitting opposite him, glanced at his mobile phone. "My brother is not coming, there is something temporary." Zhu Dong suddenly sobered up and touched out his mobile phone. "Then my name is Yenin. These are not idle second ancestors, each of them is busy with work, and they don't have much leisure time. Zhu Dong has been busy for a long time, and several other people are not much free, so if they can't get together a table to relax today, no one will be able to settle." Ji Yan heard that Zhu Dong was going to call Yenin, so he asked, "Is he free?" What's the busyness of a nominal director who doesn't do practical things? And recently alone, I don't have to accompany my girlfriend and call him here, lest Louis Fu catch us and win. As soon as the words fell, Yenin really replied to the news in a second, and came immediately. Zhu Dongan waited for Louis Fu, looked at the watch, and muttered, "Why don't you come yet? Do you wear makeup for 2 hours?" Half an hour later, a Cayenne slowly stopped at the parking desk in front of Warner Manor. There was a minor accident on the viaduct, which was blocked for a while, more than 30 minutes later than expected. Cecile Ruan got out of the car and glanced at the time. What are you doing so early? Louis Fu, play cards, will you? So you're pretty bored, and why do you think it's entertainment? What's not going to be that? Isn't it a problem of probability theory? Cecile Ruan said, I just haven't played in a long time. Louis Fu could hear a sense of pride in her tone. After entering the lobby, Cecile Ruan and Louis Fu walked side by side with the waiter towards the elevator. There is a long mural gallery on the top floor. In order to highlight the artistic conception, only the wall lamp is illuminated, dim and quiet, and the footsteps on the carpet cannot make a sound. Jing Yuan came out of the side box and saw the back of suspected Louis Fu. She paused slightly and wanted to take a closer look, but the two turned a corner and entered another passage. Why is it suspicious? Because when she saw the woman next to her turn the corner, the side face that seemed to be Cecile Ruan. Thinking about it like this, she began to be confused again. The man next to him shouldn't be Louis Fu, right? But she doesn't even see this wrong, and she can't just pull a man to have Louis Fu's figure. Isn't that woman next to Cecile Ruan? The more Jing Yuan thought about it, the more confused he became, not knowing whether it was his eyes or his memory being confused. On the other side, the waiter pushed open the door of the box, and as soon as they looked up and saw Louis Fu, they were about to say two words, and then a woman appeared next to them, and the words of greeting were immediately swallowed. Zhu Dong and Ji Yan's gaze looked around Louis Fu and Cecile Ruan without a trace, and the meaning of the inquiry was obvious. Coming, who is this? Louis Fu walked in, scanned his seat, and said nonchalantly, friend. After that, he turned around and asked, where to sit? Cecile Ruan, whatever. He pointed to a location due north, you come first. It means that she is directly put on the field. Cecile Ruan was a little uncomfortable under the gaze of the people in this box, and whispered, my hand is raw, let's take a look first. Okay, you sit next to you. The waiter immediately brought a chair over and placed it next to Louis Fu, at the same angle as the girlfriend next to Zhu Dong. After sitting down, Zhu Dong said, introduction. Louis Fu put his arm on the back of Cecile Ruan's chair and stared at Zhu Dong. Cecile Ruan. Oh, Miss Ruan. Zhu Dong got up and stretched out his hand. Zhu Dong, Louis Fu's hair is small. Cecile Ruan was a little confused by his sudden solemnity, but his face was not revealing, and he calmly shook his hand, and then his girlfriend nodded at Cecile Ruan. After that, Ji Yan naturally got up and said hello. Some things don't need to be said explicitly, they naturally understand, there is no need to ask more, and they are all calm, giving Cecile Ruan a relaxed environment. But that's what they think they are. How could Cecile Ruan not feel the atmosphere of that undercurrent? It's just that since the decision came, the situation was already anticipated in advance. Louis Fu glanced at the clock and asked, what about anyone else? Ji Yan, the banquet will arrive soon. Cecile Ruan. She sat upright and quietly kicked Louis Fu under the table. Trouble, banquet. Louis Fu coughed lightly, and in order to show that he did not know the situation, he deliberately called him. My brother has something to do temporarily, find a spare tire. Ji Yan asked, what's wrong? It's okay. Louis Fu nodded, it doesn't matter. The words fell, and he was kicked again. Louis Fu looked sideways at her, want something to eat. Cecile Ruan smiled dignifiedly, but his eyes were fierce. Gritting his teeth, he said, no thanks. Zhu Dong chuckled, it's quite polite. After being hit like this, Cecile Ruan immediately returned to his normal expression, but he had already cut Louis Fu 10,000 times in his heart. In the few minutes of waiting for Yan'an, Louis Fu took out his mobile phone and flipped through it, swiping down, and there were 2 WeChat messages from Jing Yuan a few minutes ago. Jing Yuan, are you at Warner Manor? Jing Yuan, I seem to see you. The two have not seen each other since the last bar incident, let alone had personal contact. Jing Yuan was very curious, but because she didn't have Cecile Ruan's contact information, she wouldn't have taken the initiative to send a message to Louis Fu. Louis Fu saw this news, although he didn't know what Jing Yuan meant, but he didn't plan to reply. He didn't avoid Cecile Ruan when he looked at his phone, and she saw the contents clearly. After exiting the dialog box, he cut a page, but a cool voice sounded behind him. Don't you go back. Back to what? Louis Fu casually handed the phone to Cecile Ruan, you go back and forth. His tone was as if asking a helper to bring a glass of water, naturally mixed with a little confusion, and Cecile Ruan took the phone before he felt that something was wrong. "What's going on with me going back and forth?" She threw the phone back. "Go back yourself." Louis Fu directly put the phone on the table and whispered, "How dare I?" The conversation between the two fell into the ears of others, and they all knew that they did not speak. A few minutes later, the door was pushed open again by the waiter. Although Cecile Ruan had already been mentally prepared to come to the banquet, she did not expect that Jing Yuan would come in with her. Seeing each other's faces, several people were stunned. A moment later, there was a trace of surprise, shock, embarrassment, and indescribable embarrassment between them. Of the four of them, Louis Fu was probably the only one who was calm. Cecile Ruan's expression almost stiffened. What kind of azure field is this thing? Yenin didn't move for a long time, and he couldn't seem to believe the scene in front of him. Even more incredible than him was Jing Yuan, staring at Cecile Ruan without blinking. Ji Yan was unaware of this strange atmosphere, only thinking that Yenin was a little curious when he saw Louis Fu bringing a strange woman, so he got up and greeted. "Why did you come?" He asked Jing Yuan next to him. "You came together." The banquet greeted Louis Fu's 18th ancestor, but his face was pretending to be light. "Just met," she said, to come and sit. Jing Yuan also knew Zhu Dong and Ji Yan, and no one thought much about it. Naturally, no one knew that she had come to see if the woman just now was Cecile Ruan. At this time, people saw it and confirmed it, but Jing Yuan was even more confused. "Then let's sit together." Ji Yan quickly sat them down, and said, "This is Miss Ruan." His gaze slipped around Louis Fu, hooking the corner of his lips and smiling meaningfully. "Friend brought by President Fu. Laugh at your mother." Yan and pulled away the chair forcefully and stared closely at the two opposite people. The two on the opposite side looked at their mobile phones, and one drank from a cup, and no one responded to his gaze. Louis Fu didn't bother to pay attention to him, and Cecile Ruan didn't know what expression to put on and had to drink water. Jing Yuan sat next to Yenin, her eyes looking back and forth between Cecile Ruan and Louis Fu. "Friends." Louis Fu glanced up at Jing Yuan from his mobile phone, and glanced at Cecile Ruan before he spoke. "Otherwise." Cecile Ruan still pursed her lips and didn't speak. Jing Yuan was half convinced. Ji Yandu introduced it as a friend, but did not say that it was a girlfriend, and she felt that Cecile Ruan should not be so blind. "But I felt that something was wrong." "The time is not early," Zhu Dong urged to start quickly. A seemingly harmonious mahjong game, Cecile Ruan also tried to keep her expression normal, but she could clearly feel the gaze from Jing Yuan from time to time. "Stop looking, sister. Please, your expression is almost strained." Although she did not have a deep relationship with Jing Yuan, Cecile Ruan was seen by her with a sense of betrayal. And Yenin is not as emotional as Jing Yuan, but he connected Louis Fu a few times, which seems to be an embarrassment. Knowing that these two were there, Louis Fu would not come even if she gave her a tenfold quarterly bonus. Cecile Ruan found that Louis Fu was really the only one who was calm, playing cards while asking Cecile Ruan if he was cold. "Who is still cold in this environment, and the soles of their feet are hot, okay? Not cold, well, the heating is low here." Saying that, he threw out another card. "All to who?" Yenin snapped the cards and gave money. Louis Fu smiled and pushed the chips to him. "President Yan has a good hand today." Yan Ampi smiled and did not smile. "If you lose, give money, don't talk so much." This man also hypocritically returned a friend. Can friends bring this occasion? A few more passed, and Louis Fu's phone suddenly rang. He glanced at the caller ID and said to Cecile Ruan, "I'll go out and take a call, and you'll do it for me." After that, he got up and went out, looking at the empty seats. Jing Yuan immediately looked at Cecile Ruan, and the feeling that something was wrong became stronger and stronger. Can friends bring this occasion? Fortunately, soon after Louis Fu went out, Jing Yuan was also urged by his friends. She had come here today to have her own party, but when she saw Louis Fu and Cecile Ruan, she was curious like a cat scratching before she came over. "My friend called me, I went first." After Jing Yuan left, Cecile Ruan was much more relaxed, and the sister's interrogative gaze finally disappeared with her. Cecile Ruan breathed a sigh of relief and touched a card. Cecile Ruan flipped, all in one color. Ji Yan and Zhu Dongli took the chips. "Chung, first meeting, a small meeting gift." Yenin raised his eyebrows and silently pushed the chips over. However, Cecile Ruan's temperament seems to be only in this first hand, and he has suffered a series of setbacks since then. When Louis Fu returned from the call, there were not many chips left. "You coming?" No need. Louis Fu stood right behind her, his hands on the back of her chair. It's a little tired to sit, you continue. All in Xinjiang Literature City. Cecile Ruan thought to himself that he was very good. Why did he carry it like this today? She still doesn't believe in this evil. In the next few handfuls, Cecile Ruan is particularly serious, but he still inevitably loses. Louis Fu laughed behind her. Sister, technology is not very good. It's not my turn to show my technique. Cecile Ruan's mind gradually flew to the row, not noticing Louis Fu leaning over, putting one hand on the back of her chair, leaning his face against hers, and reaching out to a card. This. Don't talk, I'll do it myself. Cecile Ruan chose another one and threw it out, and was immediately barred by Yenin expressionlessly, and then touched another one, and Yin lightly reversed, blossom on the bar. Cecile Ruan. Louis Fu turned his head to look at Yenin and said with a smile, the banquet always doesn't say to let it go. Yenin smiled, is President Fu short of this money? And Cecile Ruan stared at the card, his heart achieved to death. Why did I forget that this card has not yet appeared, and it is obvious that someone has it in his hand. Blunder. Shortly after the start of the new round, Zhu Dong let his girlfriend play, just as a waiter came in with a fresh fruit plate. Louis Fu took a crystal fork and forked an orange and handed it to Cecile Ruan's mouth. Eat something. Usually, Louis Fu's natural action is easy to make Cecile Ruan unable to return to her senses, not to mention that she now has cards in her hand and subconsciously opens her mouth to eat. This subtle movement was probably the only one she didn't notice. Zhu Dong's girlfriend next to him also said in a similar way, I want it too. Zhu Dong forked an apple, and before it was fed to people's mouths, he saw Cecile Ruan throw a card and came out, and immediately said, hoo. His girlfriend's eyes lit up, the apple stopped eating, and he immediately reversed the cards. Cecile Ruan took a deep breath. What the hell is going on today? Zhu Dong smiled and said to his girlfriend, thank you President Fu for buying you a bag today. Zhu Dong's girlfriend immediately Louis Fu smiled, President Xia Fu. Louis Fu smiled and didn't speak, while Cecile Ruan was surprised. Can you buy a bag with this pile of chips? Capitalists play so much. When this losing chip is taken out, it is completely empty. Cecile Ruan looked up at Louis Fu, still continuing. Louis Fu turned to take new chips from the waiter's tray. Go on. What if I lose again? Louis Fu was amused and played with the chips in his hand. Lose and lose, what else? How else lose and you pay for it yourself? Cecile Ruan. Didn't I fight for you? Why do you want me to come by myself? No, you guys play so big, I can afford to lose. Exploiting the middle class. Without waiting for Louis Fu to speak, Zhu Dong's girlfriend rushed to say, this is simple, losing a kiss Fu is worth 10,000. The atmosphere at the scene suddenly became hot, and everyone looked at her with a smile. Cecile Ruan's ears hidden in her hair instantly turned red. Some people echoed, I see it's okay, it's not interesting to talk about money. Louis Fu looked down at Cecile Ruan, and the chips turned in his hand with a slight sound. His gaze is not so gentle, but there is a faint provocation in it. Are you cowardly? Cecile Ruan's throat itched and she turned her head away from looking at Louis Fu. The emotions in my heart turned thousands of times, and I couldn't make a taste. Just at this time, Jing Yuan pushed the door in again, saw the strange atmosphere, and asked, what's wrong? No one spoke. But her fork in the fight gave Cecile Ruan room to maneuver. She pushed down the cards in front of her and said, I won't necessarily lose either. Surrounded by ambiguous eyes, Cecile Ruan touched the last card. With a different bet, everyone's interest rose by the way, almost step by step, and those who did not know thought that the military division was in the layout. All in Xinjiang Literature City, only the mood of Yenin is incompatible with others. It's all twice. Yen and scolded Nyang in her heart. Twice, the women he fancy have fallen for Louis Fu. Is Louis Fu the love robbery set for him by God? The time of this hand seems to be pulled infinitely slowly. Seeing that there are only the last few cards left on the table, the situation is not obvious. Louis Fu squeezed the chips in his hand, sat down slowly and methodically on the sofa behind, leaned back relaxed, and casually picked up the wine on the table. Yen and suddenly threw out a four-cylinder, and Cecile Ruan was stunned for a moment and immediately put it away. Ji Yen looked at the cards on the table, turned his head and asked Yenin, you release water. Yenin frowned, typed wrong. Cecile Ruan didn't know how they calculated the situation, but Louis Fu's voice behind him came from afar, landing without regrets. Yenin turned to look at Louis Fu with mixed emotions and sneered in his heart. What a gentleman. In this case, Cecile Ruan accepted the card with peace of mind. I touched a picture, thought for a long time and threw it out. Zhu Dong's girlfriend, who has been silent, reversed her cards. Clear. Hey, I'm sorry sister. The whole room was instantly quiet, and even the ticking of the pendulum clock was very clear. Several eyes converged on Cecile Ruan, and although the emotions were different, they were burning enough. Xing Yuan didn't know what was going on, and also looked at Cecile Ruan with the public. Cecile Ruan sat still, and the person on the couch behind him didn't seem to move. Cecile Ruan was almost pushed by the atmosphere. Louis Fu leaned lazily on the sofa, loose, and raised his eyebrows. I don't know if it's the reason for drinking. His eyes have become a little confused, and he seems to be deliberately seducing people.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to our channel for more captivating illustrated romance audiobooks. Don't miss out on our latest releases and be part of our growing community. Hit that subscribe button and embark on an enchanting journey with us.